Hello again. Tonight, we're stepping into the shadows of a game that has become more than just a piece of software. We're talking about 99 Nights in the Forest. It first appeared on obscure indie game forums around 2022, presented as a simple survival challenge. The premise was straightforward enough for anyone to grasp. Your character, a lone survivor of a plane crash, must endure 99 nights in a sprawling, procedurally generated forest. You gather resources, build shelters, and fend off wildlife. But players quickly discovered this was no ordinary survival game. There was something else out there, something watching from just beyond the tree line, turning a game of survival into a slow, creeping descent into absolute dread. The game's reputation grew not through marketing, but through hushed whispers on forums and late-night streams. Players shared stories of an oppressive atmosphere that felt almost intelligent. They spoke of the game's unsettling sound design, where the snap of a twig could be a squirrel or something far worse. The forest itself felt alive, but not in a welcoming, natural way. It felt hostile, as if the very digital trees resented your presence. This wasn't about jump scares, it was about a persistent psychological pressure that would build with each passing night. The goal was to reach the 99th night, but as players got closer, they realized that surviving was perhaps the worst possible outcome they could imagine. The initial charm of its lo-fi pixelated graphics quickly gives way to a profound sense of isolation. You are utterly alone, and the game's mechanics are designed to make you feel vulnerable at all times. Resources are scarce, your stamina drains quickly, and the nights are long and impenetrably dark. Your only companion is the flickering light of your campfire, which seems to attract as much unwanted attention as it repels. This simple setup becomes a canvas for a unique brand of horror, one that relies on what you don't see. It plays on the human mind's tendency to create monsters in the darkness, and in 99 Nights in the Forest, those monsters might just be real. Many players never even make it past the first few dozen nights. They quit, not out of frustration with the difficulty, but out of a genuine sense of unease. The game has a way of getting under your skin, of making you feel watched long after you've shut down the computer. It became a legend, a digital ghost story passed from one gamer to another. But for those who persevered, for those who pushed through the mounting dread and paranoia to reach the final levels, they discovered that the true horror of 99 Nights in the Forest was only just beginning to reveal its terrifying, twisted face. The journey to the final night is a masterclass in slowly escalating terror. For the first 30 nights or so, the game behaves as you would expect a harsh survival simulator to. Your primary concerns are starvation, dehydration, and the occasional wolf pack that wanders too close to your camp. You learn the patterns of the wilderness, the best places to find clean water, and how to craft stronger tools. There's a rhythm to it, a sense of accomplishment that lulls you into a false sense of security. You start to think you've mastered the forest, but the forest has other plans for you, and it is merely waiting for the right moment. Around night 40, things begin to change in subtle, almost unnoticeable ways. You might hear a sound that doesn't belong to any known animal in the game's files, a faint guttural click or a distant mournful cry. The AI of the wildlife seems to shift. Wolves no longer just attack, they stalk you, appearing at the edge of your vision before melting back into the trees. Deer, once a reliable food source, now stare at you with what can only be described as an unnerving stillness before bolting. The game is no longer just a set of programmed rules, it feels like it is actively learning how to scare you, adapting to your strategies and exploiting your fears. As you push past night 75, the environmental changes become more overt and deeply unsettling. The game's color palette seems to desaturate, the greens of the trees turning a sickly gray. Strange weather patterns emerge like a crimson-tinted fog that rolls in without warning, muffling all sound except for your own frantic heartbeat. Players have reported that their character's sanity begins to audibly fray. The protagonist will start whispering to themselves, muttering panicked, incoherent phrases about being watched or feeling cold. This isn't just a survival game anymore. It has become a psychological horror experience where the greatest enemy is your own perception of reality. The final stretch, from night 90 onwards, is where the game sheds any pretense of being a normal survival experience. The forest becomes openly hostile. Trees seem to rearrange themselves when you're not looking, blocking paths you used just moments before. The need for food and water becomes almost an afterthought, replaced by the desperate need to simply keep your campfire lit against a darkness that feels tangible and hungry. By the time you reach the precipice of the 99th night, you are not a triumphant survivor. You are a cornered, terrified wreck, acutely aware that you have walked willingly into a trap from which there is no escape. The true horror of the later nights manifests in three distinct, terrifying forms. The first is the appearance of cryptic phrases carved into the trees. These aren't just random scratches, they are deliberate messages. Players have found phrases like "it has eyes, don't eat," and the most common, "the hunger is a lie," etched into the bark of ancient trees. Finding one of these is a chilling moment. It confirms you are not the first person here. Someone else, another victim, has tried to leave a warning. These messages suggest a narrative that exists just beyond your grasp, a story of something terrible that has happened here before, and is happening again, to you. Then there are the totems. These are crude, disturbing effigies made of sticks, animal bones, and strips of cloth that look suspiciously like they were torn from your character's starting clothes. They begin appearing around the perimeter of your camp, usually just after you wake up. At first, there's only one, then two. By the final nights, your small clearing can be surrounded by a dozen of these silent, menacing figures. They serve no gameplay purpose, you can knock them down, but they always reappear in new configurations by morning. Their presence is a psychological attack, a territorial marking by an unseen entity letting you know that this forest belongs to it. And finally, there is the Watcher. This is the name the community has given to the elusive figure that stalks you throughout the game. You never get a clear look at it. You only catch fleeting glimpses, a tall, emaciated silhouette standing between distant trees, or a pair of pale, glowing eyes staring from the darkness just beyond your firelight. When you turn to get a better look, it's gone. The Watcher never attacks you directly. It doesn't have to. Its purpose is to break your mind, to fill you with a constant, gnawing paranoia. It is the source of the totems, the reason for the warnings, and the silent observer of your slow decay. These three elements work together to transform the game into an experience of pure psychological torment. The carved phrases tell you there's a hidden danger. The totems show you that danger is personal and focused on you. The Watcher gives that danger a terrifying, albeit fleeting form. By the 99th night, the forest is no longer just a setting, it's a hunting ground. The wildlife is no longer the threat. The real monster is the one you can't fight, the one that seems to derive pleasure not from killing you, but from watching you slowly lose your mind under the weight of its oppressive, unending gaze. For many, the horror of 99 Nights in the Forest doesn't end when they exit the application. This is where the legend of the game takes its darkest turn. Countless players have taken to online forums to share stories of how the game's oppressive atmosphere seems to bleed into their real lives. These aren't just feelings of being spooked after a late-night gaming session. These are specific, recurring phenomena that mirror events from within the game itself. The most common report is a lingering feeling of being watched, especially when they are alone in their own homes, a chilling echo of being stalked by the Watcher. The auditory hallucinations are perhaps even more disturbing. Players report hearing faint, inexplicable sounds in the quiet of their homes. The snap of a twig from an empty backyard, a faint clicking sound from a dark corner of the room, or even muffled whispers that seem to come from just outside their window. These are the same unique, unsettling sounds used to build tension within the game. It creates a horrifying feedback loop where the player can no longer distinguish between the game's sound design and their own reality. The line blurs and the fear becomes constant, untethered from the screen. Beyond feelings and sounds, some reports detail more tangible, physical occurrences. A few players have spoken of finding objects in their rooms slightly moved or doors left ajar that they know they had closed. One particularly viral story from a user on a popular forum described waking up to find a small, crudely assembled pile of sticks and dried leaves on their windowsill, eerily reminiscent of the totems from the game. While these stories are impossible to verify and could be attributed to heightened paranoia, their consistency and specificity among unrelated players are what make them so deeply unsettling to the community. This phenomenon, where a piece of media has a profound and lasting psychological impact, is sometimes referred to as game transfer phenomena. However, the reports surrounding 99 Nights in the Forest seem to go beyond simple intrusive thoughts. It's as if the game is designed to intentionally prime the player's mind for paranoia, using psychological tricks to make them hyper-aware of their surroundings. The game doesn't just present horror, It teaches your brain a new way to be afraid, a lesson that it refuses to forget long after the final night has been endured and the computer has been turned off. So to really get what's happening in the game's final level, we need to dig into the dark folklore at its core, the myth of the Wendigo. In some Algonquian indigenous traditions, the Wendigo is this evil, cannibalistic spirit. But what's even more important for us here is something called Wendigo psychosis, a culture-bound syndrome where people develop this overwhelming craving for human flesh and this intense fear of turning into a cannibal. It's a kind of madness, born from starvation, isolation, and the brutal cold of the northern forests. The exact stuff your character is dealing with in the game. The game, honestly, isn't just about making it out of the forest alive. It's about fighting off the hunger inside yourself. Clues are everywhere in the game. Like, there's that phrase carved into the wood, "Don't eat." That's not about avoiding some bad berries, it's a desperate plea. And then you see, the hunger is a lie, which just drives the point home. As your character's hunger meter drops to those really scary levels in the final nights, the stuff they mutter under their breath changes. They stop worrying about being watched and start talking about this gnawing hunger, this craving that just won't quit. The game is actually simulating the start of this psychosis. So, the real enemy, it's not the watcher in the trees, it's the monster your own character could become. The watcher's role actually makes more sense now. It's not just some random monster. It's the Wendigo spirit made real. It doesn't attack you because it's waiting for you to snap, to break the taboo, to transform. In the lore, you only become a Wendigo after you resort to cannibalism. The watcher is like stalking you, tempting you, pushing you closer to that line. It builds those creepy totems, it whispers in the wind. Also, you might finally give in to the psychosis it represents. Man, this whole interpretation makes the final level really tragic. Surviving isn't a win anymore. If your character makes it through the 99 nights by eating another human, a so-called secret resource you might find on that last night, you don't win, you change. The game ends and suddenly your perspective shifts. You're taller, you're faster, and you're looking out into the forest with glowing eyes. You've become the watcher. Now you're the monster, doomed to haunt the woods and wait for the next victim. The only real way to win? Let your character die from starvation. Choose death over becoming a monster. The mysteries of 99 Nights in the Forest are not limited to what you see on screen. A dedicated community of data miners and programmers has spent years delving into the game's code, searching for answers. What they found only deepened the enigma. The game's code is a convoluted mess, deliberately obfuscated to make it nearly unreadable. It's filled with misleading comments, dead-end functions, and variables named with nonsensical strings of characters. It's almost like the developer didn't want anyone to understand how the game truly worked, hiding its secrets under layers of digital camouflage. Despite the difficulty, a few startling discoveries have been made. Hidden within the audio files are reversed and distorted sound clips. When cleaned up and played forward, they reveal unsettling recordings. One sounds like a person weeping, while another contains a man's voice calmly reciting what sounds like a list of coordinates. To this day, no one has been able to determine if these coordinates lead to a real-world location. These audio files are never triggered during normal gameplay, leaving players to wonder what conditions are required to make them play, or if they are simply artifacts left by a disturbed developer. More intriguing are the hidden routines related to the player's system clock and IP address. Some code appears to check the real-world date and time, and there are encrypted blocks of code that seem to communicate with an external server. This has led to the chilling theory that the game is, in some way, aware of the player outside the game. It could explain why the game feels so personal, so adaptive. It might not just be learning your in-game habits, but also logging information about you, the player, to tailor its psychological assaults in ways we don't yet fully comprehend. The most famous discovery within the code is a heavily encrypted text file named orbis_pater.txt. For a long time, no one could crack it. When a breakthrough was finally made, the contents were not what anyone expected. It wasn't lore or a developer's diary. It was a complex, repeating algorithm that, when visualized, produced a series of intricate, mandala-like patterns. These patterns bore a striking resemblance to the crude design seen on the in-game totems. The code wasn't just running a game, it was generating digital sigils, leaving players to question the true purpose and intent behind this strange, haunted piece of software. For most games, a crash is a technical failure, a frustrating bug that breaks the immersion. For 99 Nights in the Forest, a crash is an integrated part of the horror. The game is notoriously unstable, especially during the final nights, and it seems to crash most often during moments of extreme tension. But when it crashes, it doesn't just close to the desktop with an error message. Instead, the screen cuts to black, and for a few seconds before the program terminates, something else appears on the screen. It is this moment that has been the source of some of the most disturbing reports. Players who experience this crash event describe seeing their screen flooded with a rapid-fire sequence of images and text. The images are often grotesque and difficult to comprehend, flashes of what look like real-life anatomical diagrams, distorted faces pulled from an unknown source, and grainy photographs of desolate, snow-covered landscapes. Mixed in with these images are lines of cryptic text, phrases like, "The mouth is the door, it wears a father's face," and "Orat Al" flash on the screen for mere milliseconds, too fast to read but just slow enough to be perceived by the subconscious mind. This is not a random glitch. Data miners confirmed that this crash sequence is a deliberate, programmed event, triggered by a set of complex, hidden conditions within the game. It's a failsafe, but not for the game's stability. It seems to be a narrative failsafe, a final desperate burst of information. It's as if the game itself is trying to tell you something that the normal gameplay cannot. It's a glimpse behind the curtain, a look into the rotted core of the game's reality. And it's designed to be as jarring and mentally scarring as possible for the player. The experience of the crash is profoundly personal and isolating. Because it happened so quickly and unexpectedly, many players initially question if they even saw what they thought they saw. They are left with fragmented, nightmarish afterimages burned into their memory. When they share their experiences online, they find others who have seen the same things, creating a shared trauma around these fleeting, terrifying moments. The crash isn't a bug, it's a feature. It is the game's final, most aggressive assault on the player's psyche, leaving them with questions and images that will haunt them long after the screen goes dark. Of all the cryptic phrases and hidden messages in 99 Nights in the Forest, none has captured the community's obsession quite like Orat Al. This short two-word phrase appears in the most critical and terrifying moments, carved into the final totem before Night 99, flashed on the screen during the crash event, and sometimes whispered by the player character in their final moments of sanity. For years, its meaning was a complete mystery. It doesn't correspond to any known language or common cipher, leading to endless speculation. Was it a developer's name, an anagram, a meaningless red herring? The breakthrough came from a user specializing in linguistics and obscure theological texts. They proposed that Orat Al was a bastardization, a corrupted form of the Latin phrase ora ad, meaning pray to. This theory gained traction, but it left a crucial part of the puzzle missing. Pray to what? The second word, al, remained a mystery. It didn't fit with Latin grammar. However, the user pointed out that in several Semitic languages, such as Arabic and Hebrew, al or el is a word for God, or a powerful deity. The phrase could be interpreted as a grim, broken command. Pray to God. This interpretation casts the entire game in a new, even more sinister light. It suggests that the events in the forest are not just a struggle against a monster or a psychological breakdown, but a spiritual battle against a malevolent entity of immense power. The phrase is not a message of hope, but one of desperation. It is the last resort of a soul so utterly tormented that their only remaining option is to pray. The warnings carved into trees and the totems are not just markers left by other survivors, they are acts of ritual, of futile warding against a darkness that cannot be stopped. But a darker theory exists. What if Al doesn't refer to a benevolent god? What if in the game's twisted lore it refers to the entity itself, the Watcher, the spirit of the forest? In this reading, Orat Al becomes a command of submission. Pray to it. This is the ultimate horror of 99 Nights in the Forest. The game is a ritual to break the player's will, to lead them through 99 nights of torment until they are ready to abandon all hope and worship the very thing that has been hunting them. The goal is not to survive, nor is it to die. The goal is to convert you. 99 Nights in the Forest is more than just a game. It is a piece of interactive folklore, a digital ghost story that continues to evolve with every new player who dares to step into its haunted woods. Its horror comes not from what it shows you, but from what it suggests. It plants seeds of paranoia, doubt, and dread that grow in the fertile ground of your own imagination. The game doesn't need high-fidelity graphics or cinematic jump scares because it uses a far more powerful engine to create its terror, the human mind. Its minimalist design is a blank canvas onto which we project our deepest fears. The game's legacy is one of unanswered questions. Who was the developer? What was their intention? Was it a deliberate psychological experiment, an elaborate piece of performance art, or simply the product of a deeply disturbed mind? The fact that the developer has remained completely anonymous for all these years only adds to the mystique. The game exists as a singular, unsettling artifact, disconnected from any creator. It feels less like something that was made, and more like something that was discovered, a cursed object that has found its way onto our computers. The elements we've discussed, the Wendigo psychosis, the hidden code, the crash events, and the chilling meaning of Oradal, all point to a meticulously crafted experience. It was designed to be unsettling on a fundamental level, blurring the lines between the game world and our own reality. It mimics the structure of a nightmare, with its own nonsensical logic and its ability to leave a lasting emotional residue long after we've woken up. It plays with our perception, our sanity, and our sense of safety in our own homes, making it one of the most effective horror experiences ever created. Ultimately, 99 Nights in the Forest continues to haunt us because it feels real. It taps into primal fears of being lost, of being hunted, and of losing control of our own minds. It suggests that there are dark things in the world, both digital and real, that we do not understand. The game ends, but the feeling it leaves behind does not. The 99th night may be the final level, but for those who have played it, the night never truly ends. It lingers in the back of your mind, a quiet whisper that reminds you to be wary of the dark, and to listen for what might be watching from the trees.